Hey everyone, I'm Magic. Today I want to talk about Dignitas. They're a really exciting team to preview for the upcoming 2017 spring split for a variety of reasons. One is that they're this returning organization with a lot of history, and now we're seeing them back in the LCS. Another is, just the funding that's been poured into them with the acquisition by the Philadelphia 76ers. They've got a lot of very well-known names on their roster, some very high-profile players, and what I'm most interested in about them is the fact that they just seem really hard to rank within the current NA LCS landscape as kind of a preseason power rankings exercise. Mark Z just came out with his power rankings and he placed them third. Another analyst who's quite well known that I was speaking with recently was still kind of working through his thoughts, but for now he had them placed as low as seventh. So there's clearly a lot of potential different opinion on where they fall within this. I'd say most people are going to have them within this kind of mid-tier group of about five teams. CLG, Dignitas, Immortals, Phoenix One, and Team Liquid they're all teams that have the potential to perform very well and threaten at the top of the standings, but they could also just not click. They could fall off and potentially miss the playoffs. So within this group, Dignitas is one of the hardest teams to place. And could be at the very top of the group. They could be at the bottom. So I want to look at some of the reasons that we might want to rank them highly, some of the reasons we might want to put them near the bottom and kind of question their ability to work together as a team. So let's start by just recapping the roster quickly. So we've got Someday in the top lane. We have Chaser in the jungle. These two are new LCK imports into North America. We have Keen in the mid lane, Laud at AD carry, and Xpecial at support. So when you look at this roster, it's pretty clear off the bat that they have one of the highest average skill levels in North America. If you take every player and just kind of average them across the board, their raw firepower in that sense is very impressive. You have Someday, who's one of the very best top laners in the world, especially with the way he plays in the mid and late game. His team fighting both on tanks and on carries, his ability to play the map, use his teleports, just coordinate with his teammates is all incredibly impressive, and people would often rank him within the top 2-3, no worse than probably fourth or fifth in the world in terms of top laner skill. You have Chaser, who is didn't stand out too much in 2016, but historically, if you go further back, he's known for playing his Nidalee and carrying games that way, controlling the map. He was probably the main threat on the GNR Green Wings in 2015. Arguably, depending on how you kind of value some of that team played in kind of a weird way, so it's a little hard to assess. But Chaser was definitely a star on that team. He can play a lot of different ways, and he's very skilled, though he didn't really get the chance to show it on Longzhu last year. So hopefully he can kind of get back to what he was doing before. I don't think his individual skill was necessarily really called into question. Laud and Xpecial in the bottom lane, both are solid players. I'd argue they're both often somewhat underrated. Neither of them is going to really be a star and jump out ahead of their teammates or ahead of the other players in their roles in the league, especially when you have players like Someday and Chaser who are more likely to stand out, and they're definitely going to get more discussion, get more attention from the opponents. But Laud and Xpecial can do good things. They're not likely to throw games. They're average or just a little above average players in the NALCS sense. And then you have Keen, who's he's got a history of being a bit of an oddball, playing that Urgot in the mid lane and starting that trend, doing some different things. The mid lane Hecarim, if you can remember that far back. He played a little more standard last split, but he still has that potential to perform fairly well, be at kind of an average level, bring out something crazy to kind of deflect some attention or just support his team in different ways. So, he's a respectable player as well. And just on that balance, they have a very good lineup on paper. They've also got one of their strengths is that they just have tons of experience as a roster. So Laud has only been in the LCS for one split, but Xpecial is, if he's not the longest standing player in the LCS at this point, then he's very close. Someday, Chaser have played a lot in the LCK, very well-known veterans there. Keen has been around for a while, kind of off and on. So the amount of experience on this roster is really immense, and they've all been more or less winners and losers at different times of their career. Xpecial was, right at the top of North America for a long time with TSM. Someday is individually one of the best players, or one of the best top laners at least in the world and in the LCK. Chaser has been, a big star on Jin Air, and kind of also experienced some losses that way. Keen with Gravity, if you'll remember, they were leading the NA LCS regular season standings for a long time, didn't perform in the playoffs, but all of these players have had their ups and downs, which means that with that kind of experience, not just stage experience, but kind of, winner and loser experience in pro play, they should be able to keep a really even keel, should not be affected too much by adversity, and should be able to overcome and improve over the course of time by drawing on that experience. So those are some really important strengths in a general sense, but when you look at some of the specifics of how this team might play, how they might play out their season, there are some reasons to ask some questions about how good they'll actually be. So some of the question marks, to me, getting a little specific, is their early game. When you look at Someday, who should be the best player on this team and the biggest kind of star, his laning phase is maybe the weakest part of his game, which is not to say he's a bad laner, but it's not a place where he stands out. Most recently, what we've seen from him in the Korean regionals and the LCK playoffs, we saw him get solo killed a lot. That was kind of strange, a little bit of an anomaly. You can blame some of that for playing a lot against, several games against Cuvée, who loves to get solo kills, and that's kind of one of the things that was most known for, at least in the past several months. He played against Smeb in the LCK finals, so he was playing against really good opponents and not giving up these solo kills to just random people. But still, his laning, he's never had really good, CS difference at 10 numbers. He's not really been the player who goes out there and asserts himself, sets the pace in the early game. So if he struggles to adapt in different ways and communicate and coordinate with a new jungler, all these things, that could make his laning struggles a little bit more pronounced. And just noting that NA has brought in a lot of very strong top laners with imports and just the existing talent that's been growing, he's going to have some stiff competition to be up against. So that's something we're going to have to watch with him. When you look across the rest of the roster, both Keen and Laud, I've said they're solid players. They're kind of on the average level, maybe a little above average, maybe a little below. But laning, again, for Keen and Laud, it's not really where their strength lies. So with 3 lanes that you can't necessarily count on to consistently win in the 1v1 or the 2v2, and then a standard lanes meta that was enforced kind of for the playoffs through to Worlds last year and will continue on this year, that makes their early game somewhat questionable. How's this going to play out? And so a lot of burden is going to fall on Chaser. In the summer split, he played a lot of farm-heavy champions. You could blame the team as a whole, the entire Longzhu Gaming team, for not being very well coordinated and giving him, opportunities to gank well or play that kind of style. But he wasn't really being that kind of jungler who would help losing lanes with a lot of first bloods and a lot of ganks like that. But when you look further back in his career, his first blood rates, when you look at spring and summer 2015 and spring 2016, he had some of the highest first blood rates of any of the LCK junglers. He had 55% 2015 spring, 61% in 2015 summer, and 50% in 2016 spring. So these are all very good first blood rates. And if he can get back to that ganking style, where he can, take a losing lane and then come in and use that loss of lane control, in a sense, to get some room to come in for a gank, then that's I think something that's going to have to be really important for Dignitas to turn around what could be a whole map full of losing lanes in at least some of their games, if not most of their games. So I think a lot of the team's success as a whole is going to come down to how well they manage this part of their play. With all of the players having to obviously step up and improve their laning, and then also working as a team to recognize if that is a weakness and how they can address it with how they use their jungler and how they draft maybe and all these kinds of things. Another question mark for me is their ability to coordinate and communicate. This is very general. A lot of these observations are very general, I realize, but this is the preseason and we can't get into specific tactical issues since we haven't seen them on the Rift. But obviously with Someday and Chaser coming in as new Korean imports, the ability to communicate in English is going to be a bit of an issue. Now, Keen is bilingual. That's always been one of the strengths of putting him on a roster. So he'll be able to facilitate that communication, but that's going to put some more pressure on him and kind of demand more of him. So in general, I think we can still expect that for at least the first half of the split, if not and the entire split all the way through into summer and extending further, communication and team coordination is going to be something we have to. I don't think we can give them the benefit of the doubt on it, to put it that way. And given that most or a large part of the strength of this roster lies in their experience, their ability to team fight, their ability to carry later on, rather than their laning and their early game and ability to kind of outskill an opponent. That's a big issue, because when you have poor communication, it doesn't erode your laning as much as it erodes your mid and late game macro play and team fighting and that kind of coordination. So if we've got a weakness in the early game and another weakness that potentially erodes their mid and late game, suddenly we've got some really big question marks across the entire span of a game. So these are some big issues that could crop up in greater or lesser extent, and this is the real challenge of rating Dignitas, is knowing how well will they be able to work around these weaknesses, how well will Someday and Chaser be able to acclimate and communicate, and learn that quickly, how well will they be able to express their skill in a weaker region than Korea. So maybe you always have the question that a Korean player comes in, a very well-known or star Korean player, does that mean that they are going to be able to have a higher skill level than the average North American player? We've seen that sometimes yes, sometimes no. So a lot of these kinds of questions, and that leads us to kind of projecting how they're going to do. I think with the strength of skill that they have, the amount of experience they have, the best case scenario for Dignitas is they can reach the finals. I absolutely believe they have the potential to get into the finals and make some noise there. By the time this split comes to an end, I think they will have obviously got a lot of games under their belt, figured out a lot of their coordination issues, and how they want to play together as a team, and they could definitely get there. I think it's more realistic that they will be a team that reaches the semifinals, or at least gets to the quarterfinals and plays really close against one of these other teams in that mid-range group of 5. Semifinals is kind of where I see them landing. I think they'll probably enter the quarterfinals as a top seed, have an advantage there, and have a bit of an edge in getting through to the next round. But I think it's more likely for them at this point to lose a semifinal than win a semifinal, just based on how I would rank the teams at this point going in. Obviously, that could change a whole lot over the next few months, but this is how I kind of setting my expectations at the moment for the team. So in the rankings that I've put out kind of casually in a couple of different places so far, I've put them 4th. Like I said before, Mark Z has them 3rd. I've seen somebody else put them 7th. I'm putting them 4th. I'm putting a little more faith in them rather than doubt. I think there are a lot of reasons to doubt them, but a lot of reasons to expect they'll be able to overcome a lot of these potential challenges over the course of the split. They'll probably have a slow start. They'll probably have a lot of early issues, but I think by the end of the split, I think they'll get there. So I hope to put out some full power rankings soon. We'll talk about Dignitas. We'll talk about all the other teams and how I see them all stacking up, including that really challenging middle group of 5. And I'm not sure exactly when that'll come out or in what form, but I do plan to release that, and we'll be able to talk about the full thing then. But this is what I think about Dignitas. I'd love to know what you think about them, where you see them landing. Maybe you see them even climbing into the top 2 and being better than most of these other teams. Maybe you see lots of these reasons for doubt and you really buy into that and question how they're going to do. Leave a comment, let me know what you think. It should be a lot of fun. Thanks for watching.